In 1815, under the golden sun of vibrant Marseille, Edmond Dantes' life shone with an almost unreal splendor. At 19, he was not merely a young and talented sailor, but the very embodiment of promise. His future stretched before him, as vast and limitless as the ocean he so deeply loved. Aboard the majestic Pharaon, a ship he considered his second home, Edmond was on the verge of ascending to the rank of captain. This promotion, a testament to his impeccable character and unquestionable competence, was a dream coming true. And, as if such professional fortune weren't enough, his personal life was even more blessed. He was madly in love with Mercedes, a beautiful and graceful Catalan woman whose penetrating gaze and raven hair captivated his heart. Their marriage was imminent, a seal on a pure union based on genuine love and simple yet joyous plans for the future. Edmond was a man of principle, integrity, loyalty, and innate kindness, qualities that, paradoxically, would make him vulnerable. He viewed the world with an innocence few possessed, trusting those around him. This trust would be his downfall. Amidst his meteoric rise, hearts corroded by envy and boundless ambition lurked in the shadows. His eyes, blind to the malice of others, failed to perceive the webs of betrayal already being spun around him. Edmond's good fortune, however, was a thorn in the side of some. Aboard the Pharaon itself, Danglars, the ship's supercargo, observed Edmond with a cold, calculating envy. Danglars was an artful man, thirsty for power and promotions. He saw in Edmond not a colleague, but an obstacle. If Dantes becomes captain, he thought bitterly, my own path to the top will be blocked forever. His mind, always conspiring, began to formulate a plan, a subtle yet devastating stratagem to remove Edmond from his way. Outside the ship, in the narrow alleys of Marseille, Fernand Mondégo's unhealthy passion for Mercedes consumed him. Fernand was a cousin of Edmond's fiancée, an impetuous man, unscrupulous, willing to do anything to possess what he could not have. The sight of Mercedes in Edmond's arms was a constant torment, fueling a blind and irrational hatred. He was the perfect tool for Danglars' malice, someone who would act without a second thought, driven by ferocious jealousy. And then there was the most dangerous of enemies, Gérard de Villefort, a young public prosecutor whose ambition was as boundless as his coldness. Villefort was a man who would sacrifice anything for his career and his immaculate reputation. His principles were rigid, yes, but served only to mask dubious morality and an insatiable yearning for social ascent. He was in a position of power, with the ability to seal destinies, and his path was about to cross Edmond Dantes's in a way that would change both their lives forever. The web of conspiracy began to tighten. In a moment of weakness and drunkenness, Caderousse, a petty and cowardly neighbor of Edmond's, witnessed the plotting. He heard the words, felt the heavy air of malice, but, out of fear and inertia, remained silent. His omission, more than a simple failing, would make him an accomplice to the crime that was about to be committed. Danglars, with his strategic mind, dictated an anonymous letter of denunciation to Fernand, a forged accusation that Edmond Dantes was a Bonapartist agent, a traitor to the crown, tasked with delivering secret messages. This letter, forged by envy and jealousy, would be the instrument that would hurl Edmond Dantes into an abyss of despair, and the world would never be the same.
Happiness, at times, is as fragile as a sandcastle. On the very day of his engagement, Edmond and Mercedes' celebration was abruptly interrupted, not by a joyful toast or a love song, but by the cold, relentless arrival of officers who came to arrest Edmond. The scene was one of pure disbelief. Mercedes, in shock, clung to her beloved, while Edmond, bewildered, tried to understand the accusation of being a traitor. "But I am loyal," he cried. "I am just a sailor." His innocence was so transparent that the cruelty of the situation became even more shocking. He was dragged away from his fiancée, from his family, from his future, without any explanation or right to defense. His fate rested in the hands of the young and ambitious public prosecutor, Gérard de Villefort. In his grim, formal office, Villefort interrogated Edmond. At first, the prosecutor seemed skeptical, almost convinced of the young sailor's innocence. Edmond, with his simplicity and frankness, recounted his journey on the Pharaon, the stop at Elba Island, and his dying captain's request to deliver a package to a certain Monsieur Noirtier in Paris. Edmond's words flowed with the sincerity that only truth possesses, and Villefort seemed inclined to release the young man. But then, the terrible truth revealed itself. Upon opening the package Edmond carried and reading the recipient's name, Villefort's face paled. The recipient was none other than his own father, Noirtier de Villefort, an ardent and well-known Bonapartist. If this connection came to light, Villefort's career would be ruined. Villefort's decision was swift and cruel. In an act of desperation and cold calculation, he tore up the incriminating letter right there, before the eyes of a bewildered Edmond, eliminating the only proof of his existence and of the conspiracy. In an instant, he sealed the fate of an innocent man. Without the right to a fair trial, without a single chance to defend himself, Edmond Dantes, the future captain and happy fiancé, was sentenced to be cast into the damp, dark dungeons of one of France's most feared prisons, the Château d'If. The island fortress, an isolated rock in the middle of the sea, was feared by all sailors. Legends said that no one ever returned there, that its prisoners were swallowed by the depths of oblivion. The sound of the heavy iron doors closing behind Edmond echoed like an epitaph for his life. His life, once so full of light, now became an endless darkness, a nightmare of stone, salt, and despair. What was expected to be his end would in fact be the beginning of a transformation, but a transformation forged in the purest and most unbearable pain of injustice.
The first years at Château d'If were a hell of solitude and torment. Time, which once raced by in his happy life, now dragged with excruciating slowness. Edmond, the optimistic young man, found himself transformed into a shadow of his former self, a bitter prisoner consumed by hopelessness and the increasingly strong idea of vengeance against those who had cast him into that abyss. His days were a monotonous routine of darkness, cold, and the incessant crashing of waves against the prison walls, which seemed to mock his lost freedom. He scratched the passing days onto the walls of his cell, each mark a silent testament to his agony. Madness, a treacherous companion, seemed to lurk at every corner, ready to claim his mind. When all seemed lost and Edmond's sanity teetered on the brink of collapse, a subtle yet persistent sound began to echo in his cell, the noise of distant digging. At first, he feared it was a delusion, a sign of his mind unraveling, but the sound was real, and hope, a tenuous thread, rekindled in his chest. Could it be a path to freedom? A sign of life? One day, part of his cell wall gave way, revealing not a path to the outside world, but the face of an elderly man, yet with penetrating, wise eyes. It was Abbé Faria, an Italian priest and scholar, who, in trying to dig his own escape route, had dug the wrong tunnel and broken into Edmond's cell. This unexpected encounter would change not only Edmond's life, but the course of his destiny forever. Faria was not merely a fellow prisoner. He was a teacher, a father, a confidant. He saw in Edmond not just a broken spirit, but a brilliant mind thirsty for knowledge, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. For years, while the two men worked tirelessly on their escape tunnel, Abbé Faria poured his vast and encyclopedic wisdom onto Edmond. He taught him languages, Latin, Greek, Italian, English, opening up a world of texts and cultures. He transmitted deep knowledge of history, science, philosophy, economics, and politics,
unraveling the complex networks of power, intrigue, and corruption in French society. Edmund, the simple sailor, absorbed everything with impressive eagerness, his mind expanding daily. He ceased to be the naive young man and became a polyglot intellectual with a keen understanding of the world and human trickery. Crucially, Faria taught Edmund the art of dissimulation, strategy, and patience, vital lessons for the vengeance Edmund already planned in his mind. He prepared him not just to survive, but to thrive, to become a master manipulator of destinies. And it was Faria who, on his deathbed, with the last sparks of his life, revealed the secret that would change the course of Edmund's life forever: the location of a fabulous treasure hidden on the island of Monte Cristo, an incalculable fortune comprised of gold, jewels, and precious stones accumulated by an ancient noble family and forgotten for centuries. This treasure, to which Faria was entitled, would now be Edmund's legacy, a fortune so vast that it could change the fate of a kingdom waiting for its true heir, and, most importantly, it would be the perfect tool for Edmund's vengeance.
Abbe Faria's health, already fragile, rapidly deteriorated. When he finally succumbed to illness, his death, though painful for Edmund, paradoxically opened the only door to his own freedom. In an act of desperation, and, at the same time, pure genius, Edmond Dantes devised an audacious, macabre, yet brilliant plan. He exchanged places with Faria's lifeless body, enduring the horror of being tied in a burial sack and thrown into the sea, as was the custom for deceased prisoners. He felt the cold of the water, the darkness of the abyss, the pressure of the currents. It was a baptism of terror and rebirth. He struggled with all his might against the chains that bound him, against the weight of the sack, against the ocean that, once his home, now threatened to swallow him. In an act of pure will to live, he managed to free himself from the bonds, emerging from the depths of the Mediterranean as a reborn man, with an ardent and relentless purpose in his heart. The escape from Chateau d'If was not just a physical escape, it was a symbolic flight from the past, from pain, from lost innocence, a rite of passage into a new existence. Swimming desperately, he was rescued by a ship of Genoese smugglers. He integrated into the crew, observing and learning about illegal trade, secret routes, and information networks, skills that would be invaluable in his new life. Disguised and with a new identity, he began to plan his journey to the island of Monte Cristo, the location of the treasure. After some time, he finally had his chance. Secretly landing on the island, Edmund, guided by Abbe Faria's detailed instructions, found the treasure the old scholar had entrusted to him. It was an incalculable fortune, surpassing his wildest dreams. Chests overflowing with gold, invaluable jewels, precious stones that gleamed in the dim light of the caves, ancient documents and property titles. A wealth so vast that it would allow him to infiltrate the highest echelons of society. He was not just rich, he was, now, infinitely powerful, one of the wealthiest men in the world. With this fortune in his hands, Edmond Dantes orchestrated his own social resurrection, a transformation that would be as complete as the one he suffered in prison. He traveled the world, polishing his knowledge, learning the ways of high society, the game of politics, and the nuances of human behavior. He returned to European society not as the simple sailor, but as the enigmatic and infinitely wealthy Count of Monte Cristo, a mysterious nobleman of unknown origin, endowed with culture, charm, and a sharp intellect. No one recognized him. Time and suffering had changed his body, and Abbe Faria's knowledge had transformed his mind. He was, in essence, a new man with a new identity, but with a crystal-clear memory of every face, every name that had betrayed him. His patience had been tested for years, and now, with the necessary resources and intellect, the game of revenge was about to begin.
24 years had passed since that fateful day in Marseille. The world had changed, kingdoms had fallen and risen again, but Edmond Dantes's memory and the injustice he suffered remained intact, crystal clear in his mind. The Count of Monte Cristo had forgotten nothing.
He resurfaced in Paris, in the heart of French and European high society, like a meteor of mystery and opulence. His arrival was shrouded in rumors, a fabulously wealthy man of unknown origin, with an encyclopedic knowledge of everything and everyone, and an aura of fascination that both attracted and intimidated. He did not seek recognition, but rather proximity to his former tormentors, who were now prospering in their lives, oblivious to the shadow that was approaching. His plan of revenge was not impulsive or violent, but meticulously orchestrated, like a complex chess game where every move was calculated to lead his enemies to their own ruin. The Count of Monte Cristo did not seek immediate death. He sought the moral and social destruction, the total ruin of everything his tormentors valued, just as he had lost everything. This made his revenge much deeper and, to an outside observer, almost a manifestation of destiny. The Count began his game with the weakest and least directly culpable, yet still complicit, Gaspard Caderousse, the innkeeper. After Dantes' imprisonment, Caderousse had received a mysterious diamond, a gift from Faria for Edmond, which brought him brief prosperity. However, his greed and weak character led him to ruin, turning him into a murderer and an outcast in an Italian prison. Under disguise, the Count confronted him, not with immediate punishment, but with a chance at redemption through truth. However, Caderousse's innate greed led him to make another fatal mistake, and he ultimately died in his own misery, a victim of his ambition and lack of character, ironically at the hands of a bandit he himself recruited, sealing his own fate. The second target was Baron Danglars, who, through his ambition and lack of scruples, had become one of the wealthiest and most influential bankers in Paris. His financial empire was vast, but built on greed and distrust. The Count of Monte Cristo, with his vast knowledge of finance and his unlimited fortune, began to subtly, yet devastatingly, manipulate the financial market. He approached Danglars, offered him excellent investment opportunities, suggestions for risky ventures, and false information that fueled the Baron's insatiable avarice. Danglars, blinded by his own arrogance and love for money, took every bait. The Count led him to commit catastrophic financial errors, investing in fraudulent stocks, lending money to failed projects, and spreading rumors that undermined confidence in his own bank. Slowly, but inexorably, Danglars' fortune, which he valued so highly, began to crumble. The Count did not take his money directly, but orchestrated circumstances so that Danglars' own greed would be the cause of his own ruin. The financial empire, which he had built on the ruins of Edmond's life, now collapsed upon his own head.
The Count's web tightened, and the next targets were the most powerful and those who caused Edmond the greatest suffering, Fernand and Villefort. Next on the list was General Fernand de Morcerf, once the envious fisherman, now a decorated war hero, a member of the nobility, and respected in Parisian high society. His social ascent was impressive, but built on a foundation of betrayal and cowardice. His wife was none other than Edmond's beloved, Mercedes, and they had a son, Albert. The sight of Mercedes, aged but still with a melancholy beauty, married to his betrayer, was one of the Count's greatest silent torments. The Count of Monte Cristo, with his vast network of informants and his ability to access secret archives, began to expose the true nature of Fernand's fortune and glory. He orchestrated a series of revelations about Fernand's war crimes, his betrayal during the campaign in Greece, where he had sold a castle and betrayed a pasha, whose harem he had dispersed. Among the victims was Haide, the beautiful and loyal Greek slave whom the Count rescued and who now accompanied him, serving as a living testimony to Fernand's dishonor. Fernand's public exposure in a court of law is one of the most dramatic moments in the work. The honor he so cherished, which was the foundation of his new life, was reduced to dust. Witnesses were brought forward, documents presented, and the cruel truth emerged, to the horror of society, and especially
of his family. The shock of his son, Albert, upon seeing his father unmasked, and Mercedes's pain as she recalled the past were devastating. Fernand's fall was complete. Dishonored, penniless, and abandoned by his wife and son, he was driven to final despair. But the most complex, intricate, and, in many respects, tragic of the revenges was against Gerard de Villefort, the public prosecutor. Villefort was a man who had built his life on secrets, lies, and a facade of righteousness. The Count of Monte Cristo not only exposed his past political crimes, but also uncovered a web of even darker and more macabre family secrets that plagued his own household. Murders, poisonings, and illegitimacy, all orchestrated by his second wife, Madame Villefort, and the manipulations of his own father, Noirtier. Villefort's house became a stage of horrors, where every revealed secret, every mysterious death, every unearthed crime pushed the family into ruin and madness. Villefort's reputation, which was the bedrock of his existence, was shattered. He, who had unjustly condemned Edmond to protect his career, watched his own family disintegrate due to his own secrets and the secrets of those around him. The Count's justice was relentless, striking the enemy at his most vulnerable point, his legacy and his sanity. It is at this point that the Count's revenge began to question its own limits.
One by one, the three men who stole Edmond Dantes' life fell to ruin. Fernand, dishonored and with no escape, took his own life, a final act of cowardice. Danglars was a human wreck, stripped of his fortune and sanity, a shadow of the powerful banker he once was. And Villefort, consumed by madness and the loss of everything, his career, his wife, his children, was the ultimate example of a life ruined by secrets and boundless ambition. The Count of Monte Cristo, the Avenger, observed the complete ruin of his tormentors. The satisfaction was real, yes, but it was a bitter satisfaction, for what remained was an emptiness. The realization that vengeance, though just, brought pain not only to his enemies, but also to innocents around him, and, in some ways, even to himself. It is at this point that the Count of Monte Cristo began to question the true value of vengeance. The pain he inflicted, even if justified by the injustice he suffered, left scars on his own soul. The satisfaction of seeing his enemies fall did not fill the void left by decades of suffering and loss. He realized that vengeance, if taken to an extreme, can consume the avenger, transforming him into something as cold and relentless as those he seeks to punish. The line between divine justice and human retribution became thin, and the Count began to question if he had crossed that boundary. One of the most poignant and revealing moments is the Count's reunion with Mercédès. She, aged but still of striking beauty, recognized him even under the Count's disguise. His gaze upon her was not that of an avenger, but of the old Edmond, full of pain and regret for the life that had been stolen from them. Mercédès, in turn, lamented the life she had lived and the choices she had made, accepting her own fate with dignity. It was a moment of profound sadness and mutual acknowledgement of irreparable loss. The Count's vengeance had, indirectly, affected her, through Fernand's disgrace and her son Albert's suffering. This pain caused to the woman he loved so deeply made him reflect on the limits of his own justice and the necessity of mercy. The Count of Monte Cristo, who until then had been an implacable agent of destiny, began to show mercy and compassion. He saved lives, helped those who had been kind to him in the past, such as the Morel family who had supported him in his sailing days, and intervened to mitigate the suffering he had inadvertently caused to innocent people. His journey led him to a deeper understanding of good and evil, punishment and forgiveness. He was no longer merely an instrument of revenge, but an agent of justice, and finally, of mercy.
He realized that true freedom and peace of mind do not reside in the consummation of vengeance, but in the ability to forgive, to accept, and to live with hope. His soul, once hardened by pain, began to heal.
With his mission of justice, or perhaps retribution, finally accomplished, and with his soul transformed by pain, experience, and newfound compassion, the Count of Monte Cristo decided that his time in the Parisian salons had ended. He no longer sought social glory or permanence in a world he had so drastically altered. He left behind the ruins of his vengeance, and the world he had shaken, the lives he had dismantled, and the lessons he had left behind. He departed again aboard his magnificent yacht, no longer driven by fury or the desire for retribution, but by the pursuit of a greater purpose, one that transcended mere justice. Accompanying him was the loyal Haiti, the beautiful and noble Greek woman he had rescued, whose presence represented a new love, a new family, and a new beginning far from the shadows of the past. She was the symbol of his redemption, the purity that contrasted with the darkness he had embraced. The journey of Edmond Dantes, which culminated in the mysterious and powerful Count of Monte Cristo, is much more than a simple tale of vengeance. It is an epic about the unyielding resilience of the human spirit in the face of the most profound injustice. It is an exploration of the complexity of morality, the thin line between good and evil, and the difficulty of defining justice when pain is so overwhelming. It is a reflection on the consequences of human actions, on how envy, ambition, and fear can destroy lives, and how forgiveness, mercy, and hope can rebuild the soul. The legacy of the Count of Monte Cristo endures. He teaches us that life is a constant learning process, that even the greatest losses can lead to a rebirth, and that true freedom is not found in the absence of physical chains, but in peace of mind. He shows us that pain can be a catalyst for growth, and that the greatest power is not that of revenge, but the ability to transcend suffering and seek a path to redemption. Alexander Dumas, with his narrative genius, leaves us one of the greatest lessons in his work, a maxim that echoes through the centuries, a reminder to all of us in any circumstance. All human wisdom is contained in these two words: wait and hope. It is a timeless message that no matter how dark the night may seem, dawn will always come, bringing with it the possibility of a new beginning, a new chance for the heart and soul. The story of Edmond Dantes invites us to reflect on our own choices, on justice, on forgiveness, and on the unwavering strength of the human spirit. The story of Edmond Dantes echoes through the centuries, captivating generations and sparking countless discussions. What part of this epic journey touched you the most? Do you believe the Count of Monte Cristo's vengeance was entirely justified, or did he, in his pursuit of justice, transcend mere retribution and perhaps even overstep it at times? We want to know what you think. Share your reflections, your theories, and your feelings about this masterpiece in the comments below. Your opinion is very valuable to us and to the Narrated Tales community. And if you were swept away by this unforgettable odyssey of vengeance, love, mystery, and redemption, and if you are fascinated by stories that explore the depths of the human soul, don't forget to subscribe to Narrated Tales and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next incredible narratives. Join our community and continue to unravel the great tales of history and literature. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey.